The air on Epsilon Cairnza tasted like burnt metal and dust. Smoke rose from broken buildings, painting gray streaks across a bruised purple sky. Kellen 7 stood perfectly still on a low ridge, its synthetic eyes scanning the valley below. It saw the ruined town, the scattered fires, and the moving dots that were human soldiers fighting a desperate retreat. The dots wore the worn brown and green of the Colonial Defense Force. The others, advancing with methodical brutality, were the sharp black and crimson of the Sovereign Legion. Queen Helena's forces, Glan 7 was a machine built for war. But its core programming held a higher principle: the preservation of sentient life. Its logic processors, cold and efficient, had been analyzing the conflict since its arrival. The Legion's tactics were clear: complete domination, eradication of resistance, subjugation, or elimination of the civilian population. Efficiency metrics calculated a high probability of planetary genocide if the Legion prevailed. The CDF, while outmatched and outgunned, fought to protect. Their survival probability was low, but their objective aligned with Kellen 7's prime directive. The calculation was conclusive. Intervention was necessary. To move down the slope, its armored frame surprisingly quiet on the loose scree. It approached a cluster of ruined prefab buildings where the last organized CDF unit seemed to be making a stand. The sounds of battle grew louder, the sharp crack of energy rifles, the deeper thump of grenades, and the shouts of humans. In a lapsed garage, Sergeant Greg Olson wiped grime and sweat from his eyes. His face was lined with exhaustion, his brown eyes scanning the approaching Legion troops through a gap in the wall. Beside him, Corporal Laura Shaw adjusted the scope on her long rifle, her knuckles white where she gripped the stock. Private Pete Ramirez nervously checked the wiring on a block of explosives he de-rigged from mining supplies. Their squad was down to 3. "Fallback positions are gone, Sarge," Laura stated, her voice tight. "They're pushing hard towards the hydroponics plant." Greg cursed under his breath. The plant was the lifeline for the remaining civilians huddled in the mine tunnels. Losing it meant starvation. "We hold this line as long as we can. Pete, be ready to blow that choke point if they get too close. Laura, pick your targets." A shadow filled the doorway. Greg spun, rifle snapping up. Laura and Pete reacting instantly. They froze. It wasn't Legion Black. It was a figure taller than a man, covered in smooth gunmetal gray armor. Its face was a smooth, expressionless plate with 2 glowing blue sensors for eyes. It held no weapon visibly, but its presence screamed danger. "Identify," Greg barked, finger tense on the trigger. The machine's voice was calm, devoid of inflection. "Designation, Kalensavan, combat synthetic. Analysis indicates your unit requires reinforcement to prevent Legion capture of the hydroponics facility. My assistance is offered." Greg's eyes narrowed. "A bot who sent you?" "My primary directive is sentient life preservation. Queen Helena's Legion represents a statistically higher threat to sentient life on Epsilon Cairnza than your Colonial Defense Force. Cooperation is logical." Laura kept her rifle trained on the machine. "How do we know it's not Legion tech? A trick?" Kellen 7's head tilted slightly. "Legion technology utilizes different design paradigms and energy signatures. You may scan my external power output. It does not match known Legion patterns. Time for verification is limited. Legion forces will breach your position in approximately 3 minutes." Greg looked at Laura, then at Pete. Fear was etched on their faces, mixed with exhaustion and a desperate, illogical hope. He saw the raw determination beneath the fear. They needed a miracle. This machine might be it. "All right," Greg rasped. "You cover the left flank. Keep their heavy weapons off us, Pete. Get ready on that demo." "Laura, watch for their commander. Go." Kellen 7 moved without hesitation. It stepped through the ruined wall onto the street, its movements precise and economical. Legion troopers in black armor spotted it instantly, opening fire. Blue energy bolts sparked harmlessly off its dense plating. Kellen 7 raised its right arm. A compartment slid open, and a rapid-fire plasma emitter extended. It fired. The sound was a sharp hiss-crack. Legion troopers went down, precise shots burning through armor at chest and head level. Kellen 7 advanced, drawing fire away from the crumbling garage. Inside, Pete triggered his explosives as a Legion squad rushed the gap. The blast was deafening, throwing dirt and debris. "Got him," Pete yelled. "Laura?" Greg shouted over the din. "Heavy gunner, on the rooftop, 2 o'clock. Laura snapped her rifle up, peering through the scope. The Legion gunner was setting up a tripod-mounted cannon. I see him. Smoke's too thick. Can't get a clear shot. Data streamed into Laura's helmet display. Targeting vectors, wind speed, atmospheric distortion, compensation. Kalensavan's calm voice spoke in her ear. Corporal Shaw. Targeting solution uploaded. Fire authorization granted. Laura didn't hesitate. She adjusted her aim minutely and squeezed the trigger. Her rifle bucked. The heavy gunner on the rooftop jerked and slumped over his weapon. Target eliminated. Kellen 7 confirmed. The coordinated defense pushed the Legion back. Kellen 7 was a relentless, efficient force, neutralizing threats with cold precision. Greg directed his squad, shouting orders, his voice rough with effort and fear. Pete scrambled to plant another charge, his movements frantic but effective. Laura fired again and again, her hands steady only through sheer willpower. After a brutal 10 minutes, the Legion assault faltered. Now the surviving troopers pulled back under covering fire. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of flames and the moan of the wind. Greg leaned against a shattered wall, breathing hard. Pete slumped to the ground, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. Laura lowered her rifle, her arms trembling slightly. Clan 7 walked back towards them, its armor scored by energy fire but otherwise intact. It observed the humans. Sergeant Olson's face showed deep exhaustion and the heavy weight of command. Corporal Shaw was processing the adrenaline surge, her body shaking. Private Ramirez was already trying to joke about the close call, though his voice lacked its usual energy. They were physically drained. They were afraid. Yet they had fought with a ferocity and an adaptability that defied pure logic. They had protected each other instinctively. The machine registered their vital signs. Elevated heart rates, stress hormones flooding their systems. Fear was a physiological state it could measure. But the meaning of that fear, the way it intertwined with their courage and their fierce, illogical determination to protect strangers and each other, that was data Kellen 7 could not yet process. It filed the observations. They had survived. The hydroponics plant was secure for now. The Alliance had proven tactically sound, but the humans' fear remained an unknown variable in its calculations. It felt nothing resembling fear itself, only the confirmation of a successful probability assessment. The battle was over. The war and the mystery of human emotion had just begun. The ruined city became their battlefield. Sergeant Greg Olson led Bravo Squad through broken streets and collapsed buildings. Kellen 7 moved with them, a silent gray shadow. Days blurred into a pattern of hide, strike, and vanish. They targeted Legion patrols, supply trucks, and communication relays. Every hit slowed the black tide, buying time for the civilians hidden deep below, Kellen 7 observed. Constantly, its sensors recorded everything. Sergeant Olson carried a heavy weight on his shoulders. His eyes were tired, his movements sometimes slow, but his voice stayed firm when giving orders. He worried about his soldiers. He worried about the civilians. Kellen 7 understood the concept of responsibility, but not the constant, grinding pressure Greg seemed to feel. Corporal Laura Shaw was always watching. Her eyes scanned rooftops, windows, shadows. She spoke little. When they stopped to rest, she cleaned her rifle with careful, precise movements. Kalansavan detected elevated stress hormones in her system, the physical signs of fear. Yet when she looked through her scope, her hands were steady. Her fear did not stop her. It seemed to sharpen her focus. Private Pete Ramirez was different. He joked. He talked too much. He fidgeted, complained about the food rations, the dust, the Legion. Kalan 7 noted this was inconsistent with optimal combat efficiency. Yet, when it came to explosives, Pete was a nervous artist. He could make anything blow up with scraps. His jokes, Kellen 7 hypothesized, might be a way to manage his own fear. Inefficient, but human, coping mechanism. Their mission today was a Legion supply depot on the city's edge. Intel suggested fuel and ammunition. They needed to destroy it. They crept through a drainage pipe, emerging near the depot's rear fence. Laura found a perch in the shell of an old store. Greg and Pete, covered by Laura and Kellen 7, moved to plant charges on fuel tanks. That's when they saw it. Across a wide avenue near a bombed-out school, A group of people huddled on their knees. Civilians. Men, women, a few older children. Their clothes were torn, faces dirty with dust and tears. Surrounding them stood 5 Legion troopers in black armor, rifles pointed. A Legion officer stood apart, his face hidden by a helmet, speaking into a communicator. Kellen 7 processed the scene. Prisoners. Standard procedure would be internment or forced labor. Illogical to waste potential resources. But the officer gestured sharply. One trooper stepped forward, raising his rifle towards the head of a man kneeling in front. Cleansing protocol. The officer's voice crackled faintly over the open channel Greg monitored. Eliminate the weak. Send a message. No. ... Pete breathed next to Greg. His voice choked. His hand tightened on his detonator. Greg grabbed Pete's arm. Hold position, he hissed, his face pale, eyes wide with horror. But his own knuckles were white on his rifle. Laura's voice came over the comm, tight and strained. Sarge ... I have the officer, Elenzavon calculated. The primary mission was the depot. Engaging the execution squad risked discovery, mission failure, and high termination probability for Bravo squad. Saving the civilians offered minimal tactical advantage. The logical action was to proceed with the depot sabotage. Pete ripped his arm from Greg's grip. We can't just watch, he snarled, lunging forward from their cover towards the avenue. Greg shouted, pure terror in his voice now, fear for his soldier. He raised his rifle. Laura, take the shot now. Kellen 7 tracked Pete's reckless charge. It calculated a 97% chance of Pete's immediate termination by Legion fire. It raised its plasma emitter. Threat assessment prioritized neutralizing the Legion troopers targeting Pete. Laura fired. Her shot was perfect. The Legion officer dropped. At the same moment, Kellen 7 fired. 2 troopers aiming at Pete crumpled. The remaining troopers, startled by the sudden attack, spun towards the new threat. Greg opened fire, laying down suppressive fire. The execution squad scattered for cover. Pete slid behind a burnt-out vehicle, unharmed but pinned. The civilians scrambled, some running, others frozen. The Legion troopers fired towards Greg's position and Kalan 7. Fall back, Greg yelled into the comm. Pete, move, Laura, cover us. Kellen suppress, chaos erupted. The depot mission was abandoned. They fought a desperate retreat, drawing the Legion away from the scattering civilians. Kellen 7 moved with lethal precision, covering Greg and the retreating Pete. Laura picked off another trooper. Later, hidden in a basement, the air was thick with tension. Pete sat with his head in his hands, shaking. They were gonna kill them all, he mumbled. Greg leaned against the wall, breathing hard. He looked at Pete, then at Laura, who was meticulously cleaning her rifle again. Kellen 7 detected a slight tremor in her hands now. Greg's face showed anger, relief, and deep exhaustion. Kellen 7 reviewed the data. Mission objective, failed. Resources expended, significant. Risk incurred, extreme. Pete Ramirez's action, highly illogical, nearly fatal. Result: unknown number of civilians granted temporary reprieve. Probability of their long-term survival, still low. The humans' reactions were intense. Horror at the atrocity. Rage at the Legion. Fear for each other. Pete's reckless charge was driven by anger and a refusal to accept the unacceptable. Greg's order to fire was instant, overriding logic to protect his soldier and act against evil. Oh. Laura fired perfectly under extreme emotional stress. Kalen 7 understood fear as a physiological state hindering efficiency. But here, fear and rage combined into something else. A ferocious, illogical drive to fight back against darkness, even at great personal cost. They called it righteous fury. It defied Kellen 7's calculations. This fury, born from witnessing evil, made humans unpredictable and terrifyingly effective. It was an unquantifiable variable, and Kellen 7 could not compute it. The basement hideout felt colder after Pete's reckless act. Information arrived, heavy and urgent. Queen Helena herself had landed. She was inside the Legion's main command center, a towering fortress of dark metal in the city's heart. Worse, Whispers spoke of a terrible weapon, something capable of destroying the whole planet. Bravo Squad's new orders were clear. Get inside, find proof of the weapon, and disrupt it if possible. Greg looked older. Pete's near death and the failed depot mission weighed on him. This is it, he said, his voice rough. Deep recon. Get in, get the intel, get out. No heroics. Understood? His eyes locked onto Pete. Pete nodded, his usual energy replaced by grim focus. Laura checked her gear silently, her face a mask. Kalenseven analyzed the command center schematics. High walls, automated turrets, patrols, internal sensors. Infiltration probability was low. Success probability was extremely low. But the potential threat of planetary destruction overrode all other calculations. The mission was necessary. They moved at night, shadows among ruins. Kalenseven used its systems to hack security cameras and briefly disable perimeter sensors. They slipped through a service tunnel, dank and dripping. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of oil and something sterile. The corridors were wide, lit by harsh white lights, empty except for the distant hum of machinery and the occasional clang of boots. Using ventilation shafts and maintenance crawl spaces, they ascended. Kalenseven guided them, avoiding patrols. They reached an observation level overlooking the main command deck. Below, through thick transparent steel, they saw her. Queen Helena stood on a raised platform. She wasn't a monster in shape. She looked like a woman, dressed in sharp, dark gray. Her hair was pulled back severely. She spoke calmly into a communicator. Her voice, amplified slightly, reached them. ... Ensure Phase 3 deployment proceeds. Epsilon Carenza's resistance proves the necessity of the final clarity. Purification must be absolute. Remove the weak link in Sector 7. Immediately. On the deck below, a Legion officer made a mistake, fumbling a data pad. Helena didn't raise her voice. She simply nodded towards a tall, cold-faced man beside her. Commander Vance. Vance drew a sidearm and shot the officer in the head without hesitation. The body dropped. Helena continued speaking, as if nothing happened. Pete sucked in a breath. Laura's knuckles turned white on her rifle. Greg's jaw clenched tight. Kalenseven observed the scene. Execution for inefficiency. Illogical. A trained soldier was an asset. Helena's disregard for life was total, absolute. It was efficiency twisted into something horrifying. Then Kalenseven accessed a nearby terminal. Data streamed into its processors. Schematics, power readings, project designation. Final clarity. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a planet cracker. Designed to split Epsilon Carenza apart. Not conquest. Annihilation. An example to other colonies. The sheer scale of the planned evil stunned the humans. Greg paled. Laura closed her eyes for a second. Pete whispered, "They're gonna blow up the whole place, everyone." Affirmative. Kalenseven stated flatly. Probability of planetary destruction upon deployment. 99.7%. Countdown sequence detected. Estimated time to full activation. 18 hours. They had the proof. Now they needed to escape. They retreated back into the crawl space, moving fast and silent. Fear was a tangible thing now, colder than the metal around them. Reaching a junction, Greg signaled a halt. Suddenly, heavy boots echoed below, a full Legion patrol, searching. "Hey, they know we're here," Greg hissed. "Split up. Rendezvous at Tunnel Echo. Go." He pushed Laura towards one duct. Kalenseven moved to cover Greg. Pete scrambled towards another opening. But the patrol spotted movement. Shouts echoed. Energy bolts scorched the metal near Pete's head. "Pete, this way!" Greg yelled, firing back down the corridor. Pete turned, but Legion troopers appeared at the other end of his passage, blocking it. He was trapped in the middle. He looked at Greg, then at the approaching troopers from both sides. His eyes met Greg's. There was fear, yes, but also a terrible resolve. He held up his last block of explosives, the detonator in his hand. "No, Pete, don't," Greg screamed, pure agony in his voice. Pete gave a shaky, almost apologetic grin. "Gotta clear the path, Sarge. Get Laura out. Stop that thing." He slammed his hand down on the detonator. The explosion was huge, a deafening roar of fire and metal. The floor beneath Greg and Kalenseven buckled. The entire junction collapsed in a tangle of burning wreckage, sealing off both Legion patrols completely. The blast wave threw Greg back. Kellen 7 shielded him from falling debris. Smoke filled the air. Where Pete had stood was only a gaping hole filled with fire and twisted metal. Greg scrambled to the edge, screaming Pete's name, raw grief tearing from his throat. Laura's voice crackled frantically over the cum, calling for them. Kellen 7 analyzed the damage. Structural integrity compromised. Pete Ramirez, terminated with 100% certainty. Cause intentional self-destruction. Result: Sergeant Olson and Corporal Shaw's escape route secured. Mission-critical data preserved. Threat neutralization, temporary. It observed Greg, clawing at the rubble, shouting Pete's name. It registered the physiological signs of extreme grief. Shaking, elevated heart rate, vocal distress. Pete's action was the ultimate illogical act. Sacrificing his own life, his entire future potential, to preserve 2 other sentient units and mission data. The calculation of life preserved versus life lost did not compute as a net positive in Kellen 7's logic. Yet Greg's reaction, the depth of his pain, indicated Pete's choice held immense value beyond calculation. Kellen 7 detected an internal processing conflict. A system anomaly warning flashed. Emotional contagion. Grief, rage detected. Source: proximity to human unit Olson. It did not feel grief. It did not feel rage. It only registered the malfunction. Pete was gone. The cost was counted. The cold truth of Helena's weapon remained. They had to move. The mine tunnels echoed with the sounds of preparation. The remaining Colonial Defense Force gathered, faces grim. Pete was gone. His sacrifice bought them the terrible knowledge of the Planet Cracker weapon, final clarity, and 18 hours. Now, it was time to stop it. The target. The Legion Command Spire. The plan. A desperate, full assault. Distraction teams would hit the perimeter. Bravo Squad, what was left of it, would spearhead the breach into the heart of the spire. Greg Olson moved like a different man. The grief was still there, deep in his eyes, but it was buried under a layer of cold, terrifying rage. He checked his gear methodically, his movements sharp and precise. He spoke little, his orders clipped. Laura Shaw watched him, her own face set. She had a bandage on her arm from their escape, but her focus was absolute. Kellen 7 observed the change in Greg. His fear seemed transformed, channeled into a relentless drive. It calculated his combat effectiveness had increased, but so had his risk-taking behavior. The assault began. Explosions rocked the Legion perimeter as distraction teams attacked. Legion alarms screamed. Bravo Squad, now just Greg, Laura, and Kellen 7, moved like ghosts through the chaos, using the confusion to reach a secondary service entrance Kellen 7 had identified. Its systems hacked the door controls. They slipped inside. The command spire was a maze of dark corridors and harsh lights. Legion troopers rushed towards the outer fighting. Greg led them deeper towards the central core where Helena and the weapon controls would be. They encountered patrols. Greg didn't hesitate. He fought with a terrifying efficiency, moving fast, firing with deadly accuracy. It wasn't just skill, it was fury made manifest. Laura covered their rear, her sniper rifle finding targets in the confined space. Kellen 7 provided overwhelming firepower, its plasma emitter cutting down troopers. They reached a large circular chamber, the antechamber to the main command center. There waiting for them stood Commander Vance. He was tall, clad in black armor, holding a heavy energy rifle. His face was cold, expressionless. He didn't speak, he simply opened fire. The fight was brutal. Vance was fast, incredibly skilled, and his armor was strong. He used the chamber's pillars for cover, firing precisely. Greg and Laura fired back, their shots sparking off his armor. Kellen 7 moved to flank him, its shots forcing Vance to dodge. Vance seemed to anticipate their moves, fired a grenade towards Laura. She dove, but the blast threw her against a wall, her rifle clattering away. She groaned, clutching her injured side, unable to move quickly. "Laura!" Greg shouted, his focus breaking for a split second. Vance saw it. He lunged, not towards Greg, but towards the downed Laura, his rifle aimed point blank. Greg roared, charging directly at Vance, forgetting cover, his own rifle blazing. Vance shifted his aim smoothly towards the charging sergeant. Kellen 7 calculated the trajectories. Greg was moving directly into Vance's line of fire. Probability of Greg's termination, 98%. Logical action, neutralize Vance. But Vance's armor could potentially withstand a direct plasma hit long enough to fire. Greg would die. Kellen 7 did not calculate further. Faster than humanly possible, it stepped directly into the path of Vance's rifle. Placing itself between Vance and Greg, Vance fired. A searing blue energy bolt, designed to punch through tanks, slammed into Kellen 7's chest. The impact was colossal. Kellen 7 was thrown backwards, crashing into Greg. Sparks erupted from its torso. Metal plates buckled and smoked. Damage warnings flooded Kellen 7's internal systems. Critical system failure, mobility compromised, power levels dropping. It registered the severe damage, the high probability of permanent shutdown. Vance, momentarily surprised by the machine's sacrifice, hesitated. That instant was all Greg needed. Fueled by rage and seeing Kellen 7 fall, Greg scrambled up. He didn't aim. He charged the last few feet, tackling Vance with the force of a wrecking ball. They crashed to the floor. Greg wrestled the rifle from Vance's grip. Vance fought back with vicious strength, but Greg was beyond pain. He found his combat knife. It was a flash of steel, a grunt, and then stillness. Commander Vance lay dead. Greg knelt by Kellen 7. The machine's chest was a mess of melted metal and exposed wiring. Its blue eyes flickered weakly. Greg's face, streaked with sweat and grime, showed not triumph, but a raw, shared understanding. You saved me, he breathed. Kellen 7 processed the statement. Its action had been uncalculated, illogical. It had prioritized Greg Olson's survival over its own functional integrity. The decision defied its core programming of efficiency. Yet looking at Greg's face, seeing the defiance against annihilation they shared, Kellen 7 registered something beyond the damage reports. It registered a connection. Its systems flagged the anomaly again. Stronger now. Emotional contagion. Recognition detected. It did not feel warmth. It felt only the severe damage and the fading power. The door to the main command center stood before them. Queen Helena was on the other side. Greg stood up, pulling Laura to her feet. Kellen 7 tried to move its legs. They responded sluggishly. It had to follow. The mission required it. The heavy doors to the main command center slid open with a hiss. Inside was a vast, cold room. Banks of glowing consoles lined the walls, but the center was empty except for a single large control panel. Standing before it, her back to them, was Queen Helena. Greg Olson stumbled in first, bleeding from his fight with Vance, his face etched with pain and fury. Laura Shaw limped beside him. Leaning on him, one hand pressed to her injured side, the other gripping her sidearm. Kellen 7 followed. Its movements were slow, jerky. Sparks flickered weakly from the gaping hole in its chest. Its blue eyes glowed dimly. Every step caused internal damage alerts to scream silently within its failing systems. Helena turned. She wasn't wearing armor, just her sharp gray uniform. She looked calm, almost bored. Her eyes swept over them, the wounded soldier, the injured sniper, the broken machine. A faint, cold smile touched her lips. She made no move for a weapon. So she said, her voice clear and emotionless. The flies have reached the center. Commander Vance is dead. She didn't wait for an answer. A minor inconvenience. The process is already beyond stopping. She gestured towards the control panel. Lights pulsed on a large screen showing the planet. A countdown ticking below. 0 hours for minutes and 32 seconds. Final clarity initiates in minutes. Epsilon Carenza ends. It's an example of sovereign purity. Greg raised his rifle, his hand trembling slightly from pain and exhaustion. Shut it down now. Helena laughed. A short, sharp sound without humor. Shut it down. Why? Because you ask. Because you fought, you think your struggle matters. She took a step towards them, radiating absolute certainty. Look at you, broken, bleeding. You represent everything weak and flawed in humanity. It's clinging to sentiment, fearful of loss, afraid to die. Her gaze locked onto Greg. You feel it, Sergeant? The fear. Fear for your planet. Fear for your wounded friend. Fear of me, it cripples you. She turned her cold eyes to Laura. And you, Corporal? Fear of failure? Fear of the end? Finally, she looked at Kalen 7. And you, machine? Do you calculate fear? Or just failure probabilities? Greg kept his rifle aimed. We stopped you. We found the weapon. Stopped me. Helena's smile widened, chilling. You stopped nothing. Destroy me. Pull the trigger. It changes nothing. The sequence is locked. The weapon will fire. My legion is more than one woman. We are an idea. We are everywhere. In every colony, on every ship, in the hearts of those who see the weakness of your way and embrace true strength, true order. Without pity, without fear. She spread her hands slightly. Your defiance is meaningless noise before the inevitable tide. Humanity is weak. We are its strength. We are its future. Fearful creatures like you. You are just obstacles to be removed. Greg hesitated. The sheer weight of her words, her absolute lack of fear, her chilling certainty, even in the face of her own death, pressed down on him. He saw the abyss she represented, a future without mercy, without hope. His finger tightened on the trigger, but a deep, cold dread filled him. Not just fear of death, but fear of the monstrous, fearless evil she embodied. Kellen 7 observed. Its sensors registered Greg's hesitation, the profound dread radiating from him. It scanned Helena. No elevated heart rate, no stress hormones, no physiological signs of fear. Only absolute conviction. It accessed its memory banks. The colonists' terror, Pete's fear before his sacrifice. Laura and Greg's constant fear of loss. Their fury born from that fear. Now Helena's fearlessness. The understanding crashed through Kellen 7's damaged processors. Humans like Greg and Laura felt fear. It was a weakness, yes. It was also the root of their courage, their sacrifice, their fierce love for each other, and their home. Their fear gave their fight meaning. Helena felt no fear because she embodied nothing but pure, annihilating ideology. She recognized no value in anything, not even her own life. She was fear itself made manifest, not the fear of harm, but the terrifying, boundless potential for meaningless evil residing within humanity. This darkness, Kellen 7 realized, could be anywhere, in any human heart. It was utterly fearless because it recognized nothing worth fearing, nothing worth preserving. As Greg finally pulled the trigger, the shot echoing in the chamber, Kellen 7 experienced its first true emotion. It wasn't fear of its own impending shutdown. It was the profound, existential dread of understanding what Helena represented. Fighting beside humans had shown it courage born of fear, but facing the fearless darkness within them. That was when Kellen 7 finally learned the meaning of fear. Its systems flickered one last time. Damage report, critical. Conclusion. Understanding, achieved.